Okay, welcome everyone. It's just at top of the hour here. We're going to give everyone another minute or so to log into the webinar, and then we will get going. Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. It looks like there's still quite a few people starting to log in, but we've got a good size audience so far, so I'm gonna get going. My name is David Brown, and today we're gonna be speaking with Jeff Gontovnick at Weathered Islands and Jacob Saffer-Spiro at Willow Weed, two outdoor micro cultivators, on their experience being two of the first outdoor micros to get products onto provincial shelves. So I have a handful of questions for our guests today. We'll probably go to about the half-hour mark, and then we're going to open up the floor to questions from the audience. And so feel free to post those questions in the chat throughout today's conversation. And I just want to then jump right into it if everyone is ready, and start with Jeff over at Weathered Islands. And Jeff, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Weathered Islands?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, thanks, David. Great to be here. Really excited for this, just to talk a little bit about from field to shelf. So bit of an intro for myself and Weathered Islands. Weathered Islands, we are an outdoor focused genetics company. We're based on Texado Island, BC. So if you've heard of the Texado Time Warp strain, that's a Texado original. Lot of history of breeding and cultivation on Texado. And our strains really have a lot of deep roots lineage from classic BC outdoor. We got our nursery license in March of 2020, and we just got our micro license in May of this year, which fortunately was just in time to be able to have a full outdoor season. So for myself, my name is Jeff. I've been in the cannabis industry about 3 years with Weathered Islands. I come from a sales and a business consulting background. So long time cannabis enthusiast, but new to the production side of the industry. Oh, David, I think you're on mute.
Okay, and Jacob, let's jump over to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Willow Weed.
Hey everyone, there's definitely some familiar names in the chat, so it's great to be talking to everyone. Great to be here. I love the initiative because certainly is an underestimated portion of this industry is the outdoor micros. There's a lot of potential there. I'm the founder of Willow Weed. We were one of the first outdoor micros in Ontario. Probably, in a lot of Canada, because we were licensed in May of 2020. So we just finished our second harvest. So I'll be talking about, things that we learned about from last year's crop to this year's crop. Personally, I believe the youngest license holder in Canada. So I'm also a part-time student. And I mention that just because I think a lot of, over the past 3 or 4 years has been a huge learning curve and a great experience that I'm just hoping to share with everyone today in respects to the cultivating and the selling of cannabis.
And Jacob, just for the audience, how old are you?
I'm 21.
21. So you were 19 when you started, when you were first
licensed. I was 19, yeah. So I was just legal just to smoke and get the license when I got it, yeah.
And the farm you're growing on, that's land that your family has owned. Is sort of the family farm that you're growing cannabis at now. Is that right?
Right. So Willow Farm has been in our family for about 20 years. I grew up here. We grow a variety of crops. It's not necessarily a commercial farm. Cannabis is our main focus. It's always been more of a homestead, but we come from a farming background and a very much organic and living soil farm.
So 2 years in now, Jacob, what have you learned in those 2 years that you might do different next year? First looking at sort of crop selection and outdoor growing methods.
Yeah, exactly. So I would break it down into so many different steps. starting with, clones and then growing and then harvest and then selling, I break it down to like the four main kind of components of each year. So starting with the clones, last year, we had grown out the Texado Time Warp from Weathered Islands. So I can certainly recommend that strain, high yield, great THC, shameless plug for them. But I really did, enjoy growing out those clones. I would say though, because we got some clones from Jeff at Weathered Islands, and we also got clones from another nursery in Alberta. And the shipping of clones across Canada is a very difficult process, and especially when they're rooted in soil. And this was, I think, like Jeff had just got their nursery license, and it was very early days. So I'm sure there's been a lot of innovation, but we had received those clones and they were not in the best shape. This year, when choosing clones, a main criteria was that they were actually from a place where we could just go and pick them up, because having the clones shipped across Canada just kind of stressed out the plants. Maybe there's been more innovation from Jeff's side. I'm sure there has been. So that was a main criteria. Other criterias from choosing clones were the unique lineage. So we grew out like a cherry rugburn, which is not really so widely available. Of course, picking high THC strains is crucial. And also just making sure that they're acclimatized to outdoors and that they go to finish on time, especially here in Ontario, where we can get just crazy rain seasons in early fall. You want to make sure they go to finish on time. It's really a game of genetics for a large part. So having those tried and true genetics is really crucial to all outdoor growers. Going into more of the growing aspect, last year we got seeds in our crop because a hemp farm unknown to us had actually opened up not too far from us. And in Canada, there's no regulations distancing hemp farms from cannabis farms like there are in the States. So this year we had put up a greenhouse in order to prevent the seeds. And though that greenhouse did actually prevent like 95% of the seeds. So that's just something to consider when you're kind of planning your outdoor grow up, because nobody wants seeds in their weed, obviously. We implemented a lot of pruning techniques this year, simple things like topping, which we didn't really experiment last year, but just can really increase yield. I see there's a question about our soil. So our soil is just, it's nothing too complicated. It's all organic. It's all living soil. It's mostly peat loam, perlite, topsoil, leaf mulch, and some cow manure for the organic carbon. We added in some cricket frass as well this year. We don't add any liquid or chemical nutrients to that. If there's anything.
And you guys are growing in cloth pots, right?
We grow in fabric pots. That was another thing. So last year we grew about a third in the ground and a third in pots. This year we filled in that third with more pots. I just found that with the pots, we're able to control the environment a lot more. Outdoors, you just have such little control. I was able to really control the watering cycles and a lot of the soil when I was growing in those pots. So I've heard, when you're just putting them in the ground, and it really just depends on the soil quality. But even if you're putting them in the ground, I'd say you'd still want to start off with a good new soil mix that you can really trust. Last year I experimented with Compost Teas and I found some success. This year I did Compost Teas again, and I actually got like leaf mold from the Compost Tea. I'm not sure why, but it's not something I would ever do again, just because it's not really scientific. I know that's kind of controversial. Some people love Compost Tea, some people sort of off of it. Just from my own personal experience, I probably wouldn't do it again. The spacing of the pots, or from plant to plant, Last year, I did like 5 feet stem to stem, which was not nearly enough room outdoors. I recommend that you grow like at least 10 feet stem to stem. It depends on the genetics and stuff, but I find that, you know, with outdoor plants, you want to be getting as much yield as possible. So you want all those side colas. If the plants are too close together, then there's not enough sunlight penetration. So yeah,
So
like
fewer large plants rather than a lot of small plants.
yeah, it's kind of counterintuitive, but you can in terms of filling up that 200 square meters, you can get more yield with less plants if those are larger plants than kind of squishing them all in. So certainly less plants is actually more yield if you can get all those side colas and you can get the proper airflow, right? And then I can go into the harvest, which I think this year we're just a lot more prepared in terms of how much work it was actually going to be, because this is where I think the quality of the micro can really come into play, being on a small scale. So because craft, I think, really just means doing everything by hand. So ensuring that you have the workforce in place where you're not going to be stressed and you're going to be able to get all of the harvest done in time and you're not racing against Mother Nature. We stripped all the fan leaves off wet this year, found it to be a lot easier than taking them off dry. And then something unique which we do at harvest is washing the cannabis as well. And we have found both years that this helps us pass microbial. Otherwise, it's very hard to pass microbial for outdoor growers. And I think especially people with legacy roots, something to really take into consideration, that if you are an outdoor cannabis farm and you're going to go the flower market the way Jeff and I are, that no matter how good your cannabis is, if you don't pass microbial, you're going to have to remediate. So of your options of E-beam or irradiation, I think washing is definitely the most economical, as well as, sorry, to see your question. What do you mean wash the cannabis? Absolutely. So how our Provis assembly line works is we'll chop the branches off of the plants because we hang to dry. We take off all the fan leaves. We put those branches in kind of like a kiddie pool of it's 10 parts water to 1 part agricultural hydrogen peroxide, so 29%. We wash it in there for 60 seconds, and then we wash it in a second pool of just water for 60 seconds. And then we kind of let all the water drip off, and then we hang it up to dry. And that's the process. Tamara Follett, who I believe is in the chat, trailblazed that method. And it's definitely been revolutionary, I think, for outdoor micros. Continuing with the, yes, Dave.
No, go ahead.
Oh, sure. Continuing with the harvest process, really understanding the importance of quality when it comes to drying and making sure you have that climate controlled space and that you have a large enough space to dry that cannabis. Last year, we didn't have a climate controlled environment, and it was very difficult to preserve the quality because you really want like a slow and dry, slow and low temperature and proper humidity levels. Hang drying is going to take up a lot more space than drying on racks. So if you go that route, just know that you're going to need like 10 times as much space. And that's just one of the factors that you kind of have to think about. I invested in like a $50 moisture meter this year, so I could tell exactly when the buds were ready to dry, because it's so crucial. Like the 3 questions that I get asked when trying to sell is THC, terpenes, and moisture is actually the third now main factor. I don't like Alberta, for example, won't even buy cannabis that I think is less than 10% moisture. So that moisture meter really helped us being able to take it down in time. There's another question. So interesting. I did before and after tests of the washing for terpenes and trichomes. There was no difference from a THC perspective. And the terpenes actually went up. That doesn't make any sense to me. I don't think the terpenes actually went up, but it shows that at least it didn't go down. So I think I was very optimistic to see those results.
So before we kind of get past, harvest and looking into the markets, I wanted to hop over to Jeff to just ask him the same question. Now with 1 year under your belt, as well as your experience with the, if I'm correct, the nursery license, at least some aspects of that are outdoor as well. And it sounds like, your grower has quite a bit of experience growing on Texado. But what did you learn this year in terms of the outdoor microcultivation license that you might do differently next year?
Yeah, 100%. I think, a lot of what Jacob mentioned is really true. Like you really dial in the process in your first year. And there's so much that you learn. I mean, I think probably everybody on this call with a micro can kind of relate to that. The genetics is certainly first and foremost. And, the learning's all across the spectrum, right? I mean, Jacob, you're our shipment of clones to you, right? Like that was one of our first clone shipments. And you're right, like we've learned so much since then. And ultimately, like feedback is a gift in these scenarios, right? Because, Jacob was great because he worked with us, sent us a ton of pictures like, hey guys, this is how they ended up. Worked with him on some kind of thoughts and some ideas on how to make that better. And I think that's such a crucial thing in this business is working with people using your network. But on the genetics side, I mean, Collier Quinton, who's our master grower, he's been breeding on Texado for 25, 30 years. And he is behind a couple pretty legendary strains. I mean, the Apricot Kush, which has been out on the market probably 6 to 8 years. So he was the original breeder for that strain. There's a ton of versions of it, but the thing that makes that strain great is it finishes early. And we've found this to be so crucial to our harvest process. Is we grew a strain this year called the Sweet Texado Lavender. It's live in the OCS right now, but we had our entire harvest in by September 20th. And what that allows you to do, I mean, it gives you so much more room to treat the plant right post-harvest and then get it into the hands of whoever's going to be doing the processing for you. And then it gives you that kind of ramp up to be able to get it into stores. Jacob made a great point around knowing what you're going to do with the product before you harvest it. Like if you can get to that point, it is such a huge advantage because you remove a bit of that guessing game after harvest where you're just kind of sitting on a whole bunch of, bulk flower and still really trying to get it out onto the market. So that's a big piece. As far as the process goes, I think there's a lot of different things that I think we are going to do differently next year. I mean, we were pretty happy with the yield, but I think this year we're going to continue, improving our soil amendments as well. I mean, this was kind of our first year growing in this particular section of the property that we're on. Similar to Jacob, I mean, we do a lot of, high quality soil inputs like seaweed, high quality compost. If you check out our Instagram, you can see some great photos of us bringing up trailer loads of seaweed into the garden before we got our license, just to kind of get the soil to the level that we wanted to. And so you really get a lot of that kind of like local, feel and flavor, which I think helps the terpenes. But then even around the drying process, I mean, we do a staged harvest where we're bringing in, branches of the plants. We're not necessarily bringing in a plant, every plant individually as a full plant. That process worked, but of course, there's things that we need to dial in to just continue to make sure that we maximize the yield and make sure that there's no trichome loss, terpene loss, anything like that. So a lot of things I think that we'll continue to learn. Next year will be a better year. We will have even better quality flower than we did this year, but I expect that to continue. I think it's always a learning process, and I don't think we'll ever fully perfect it.
And in terms of developing relationships with partners in order to get your products into provinces, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of that comes back to your network, right? We, both Jacob and I, and probably a lot of people on this group, are a part of the Canadian Microcultivation group on Facebook. Have met a lot of people through there in the industry, but have met a lot of people, David, through yourself as well, and just through different connections. I think coming from a business background and similar to Jacob, kind of going through business school, I mean, you really learn to connect with people and network, and basically every conversation could lead you somewhere. So it's a good opportunity really to just have a lot of conversations, see who's doing what in the market, and share some best practices. So we're working with a couple of processing partners. We connected with StratCann late last year. Our initial connection, because we're a nursery as well, we sell seeds in the recreational market too. So we have a couple of seed SKUs in Ontario. We're releasing a couple in BC this week or next week. I believe they should be available. But that was kind of the beginning of our relationship with StratCann. And so they expressed interest and, built a great relationship with them. I mean, they're awesome people. Highly recommend working with them. And so for flower this year, we also needed to find a partner with a sales amendment. So we reached out to Apothecary Botanicals. And so they were our partner for bringing our flower into the OCS. So we had all of that kind of basically ready to go, like midsummer, so that we were able to go through the OCS's product call process. And essentially we knew kind of how everything was going to shake out, basically from, in the field to on the shelves. Still a ton of learning. I mean, you can plan and prep as much as you want, but there's a lot of things that we found we were scrambling on just as kind of our first time going through this process. But both of our partners I found great to work with. And again, using your network, and they have a lot of knowledge that we've been able to pick up on, and it's been a huge benefit to us.
And Jacob, then basically the same question for you. What has been your experience of developing those kinds of partnerships 2 years in now?
So yeah, going back to the importance of the network, and one of the things which is very enticing for me about this industry and this business is that it's very much a community. And I just love kind of having that feel that we're kind of all in this together, and just being so open and being not competitive, but just very collaborative and a safe space to share ideas. And as important as the network is, of you reaching out to people, it's also very important that if people want to reach out to you, they know how to. So both times, like both of my partners this year and last year, were processors who reached out to me, who I had never heard of them before, but they had done research, they'd searched in like high quality cannabis, whatever it be, into Google, and Willow Weed comes up. So that means like having a good website, having an Instagram, which I know, Jeff and I both have these things down. It's still a tough business, and the cannabis isn't going to sell itself. When your license get listed on the Health Canada page, it being a numbered corporation is not helping anybody. I know so much of the marketing is business to business. So just being accessible for if somebody does want to reach out to you, they know how to. I think that's just kind of step one. And then in terms of certainly like the Facebook page has been a great way to network and to learn new information. Last year, right? So we were reached out to a processor in BC, Benchmark Botanicals. I don't think they exist anymore. They were a public company, and I think they've been taken over. but I was reached out to by like a very good sales representative, and we had formed a partnership to take our product to market originally under flower. Because we had seeds, we had decided to go the pre-roll route. So we put everything into pre-rolls. And then they had success selling that through medical channels and into Saskatchewan, Manitoba. So that company had called me in like midsummer, and we kind of had everything ready to go by the time I had the harvest ready. This year, I was reached out to by Dexter Greenhouses, which they're local, they're in the Niagara region. And they had this cool idea of a contract grow, which is very common in like other agricultural products, but it's kind of new from an outdoor perspective in the cannabis space, where essentially we signed an agreement where I would grow their clones. So they have this great sweet venom genetic. They gave me the clones. I went to pick it up from their facility. I grew out those clones, and then we agreed on a price and a yield for the end product. And just 2 weeks ago, I drove all the product, the dried flower, to their facility in Niagara, where they actually did all the hand trimming for us. So that was super beneficial, that not only were they looking to sell our product, but because they had, so it was really a true partnership, like from step one to the final step, from the clones right into the trimming, we were working side by side. And because they have open POs with the provinces, in this case, it's BC, and I was growing out their strain, which already had a PO, it's already on its way to BC. That the product that I dropped off just 2 weeks ago. And we'll ultimately, Sweet Venom is now live in BC. Amazing. Didn't even realize that. It's fantastic. Everyone go, if you're in BC, you can go try some outdoor flower, support local, support outdoor micros. And just in terms from a cash flow perspective as well, like having a team that was ready to go, where I did not have to kind of sit on my product for like months, like with uncertainty, not knowing where it's going to go, but having that security, even if it meant taking a little bit less dollar, if it meant more security, because, you know, honestly, there are definitely a lot of outdoor crops which are having difficulty finding a buyer because it's just so flooded right now, and it's going to be an uphill battle trying to explain to processors why your product is better just because you're a micro, and you're still kind of competing with the acres and acres. But, you know, for all the processors listening in, let me be the first to tell you that you're really comparing apples and oranges when you're talking about an outdoor micro and a micro growing dozens and dozens of acres. So that was kind of our field to shelf, having that contract grow and seeing that partnership through all the way to the end.
Can you talk, and I'll ask both of you guys, but I'll start with you, Jacob, talk a little bit more. You know, there is a lot of conversations, obviously, in the micro community about frustration with the need to partner. And I think it's interesting that you have talked about some of the benefits of that partnership. And have you maybe found that experience where, you know, some partnerships are maybe less beneficial, and there's others like the one you're talking about now, where it shows maybe that there is an opportunity to create that partnership? Or conversely, are you looking forward to a time when you can get your own processing and sales license so that you can own all of that yourself?
Certainly. I mean, like, so we also grow, we keep bees in our farm, and with our honey, a lot of it goes to wholesale, but our real profit comes from like farm gate and selling it locally. And it should be the same with cannabis, where you really need both, you know, so wholesale pricing will always be lower than selling, you know, the closer you are to the customer, the more margin you're going to have. So unless you kind of have both, it's very hard to survive. And right now, because the way the cannabis regulations in the industry is set up, farmers are stuck with just wholesale prices. And that's not the fault of the processors or anybody. I mean, it's just the way the system works. I can't sell cannabis at the top of my driveway the way I do with our other crops. And the process of getting a processing license, a farm gate license, a sales license is something that will not be feasible for our company if you just think about the costs and all the steps involved. So it goes back to that you are kind of in between, you're in between not selling your crop or finding that processor. Those are your two options for a lot of outdoor micros. And choosing a partnership that you can trust and that you can grow together is the only sustainable path forward, I think.
And Jeff, so same question for you. Do you see Weathered Islands getting a processing license and sales amendments in the future, or do you see yourself always looking to partner with others who can get into those provinces?
No, I think we're always going to look to partner. I mean, we know what we do well, and I think we're going to continue doing that. It's similar to Jacob actually on the farm gate side of things. I mean, I know there's some, there's developments in BC around that, and we've kind of been a part of giving feedback around that. The feasibility for us as well, probably not there because of where our facility is and just kind of the layout of that. I love it as a concept, but again, maybe not as much for us. But yeah, we're going to stick to, I mean, you never know down the road, but I think where we're at right now, sticking with what we know that we do best. And I mean, on the side of kind of getting product to market, this is actually, I think, a really big piece of learning. I mean, for us, and, some advice I would have to anybody looking to get product to market is understand what you want to do. I mean, understand because you have so many choices, right? I mean, Jacob's outlined quite a few there. And I think there's this misconception that there's not a lot of choices, or that, there's a lot of kind of predatory companies out there. And I mean, maybe there are a few, but I think knowing the direction that you want to go with it is so important. And I'll give an example. I mean, for us, we knew that we wanted to have our brand out there. That's a big decision, because having your brand out there means we had to pitch OCS. We have had to pitch BC. Like, we've had to go and find the contacts there and build those relationships and make those pitches. We are also responsible for selling the product to retailers, right? So it's our brand. We have to call up stores in Toronto and say, hey, here's who we are. We're a BC micro. Our product is super unique. And that's how we have to push our product, right? So if you're working with, and there's a lot of options around kind of getting your product, white labeled or rebranded, or, I mean, there's this new trend that I'm noticing of, there's a lot of companies with these, I don't know if it's a sales amendment or a processing license, but they're these companies that are reaching out and looking for micro product to stock under their brand. And I think that's a great option, right? That's an amazing option. But you really have to understand if that's what you want, right? And I think for the micros, you really have to do the due diligence of, is this a partnership that makes sense for me? Obviously, every company is going to be looking after their bottom line. I mean, processors have to make money. Sales amendment holders have to make money to survive. So every company is going to be looking out for that. So just making sure that there's a clear understanding of who's responsible for what, and, getting an agreement in place so that it's predictable, or as much as it possibly can be. And again, you kind of have your understanding of how the next few steps are going to play out to get your product, again, from the ground onto the shelves.
So there's a couple questions in the chat I want to get to, but Jacob, I had one last question for you. I think last time we talked, you had mentioned you had gone through a Health Canada inspection earlier this year, in-person inspection or virtual inspection. I'm wondering if you could just talk about that a little bit. There haven't been a lot of inspections in the micro space so far.
Yeah, and I actually think the two inspections that we had, I think it was their first micro. So I guess they're kind of catching up to that. It was supposed to be in person, and a day before the inspection was going to happen, there was some sort of COVID outbreak in the office, and it got switched to virtual. But it could have been either one, and it just lasted one day, and it really wasn't. Definitely, maybe I was a bit nervous leading up to it because it was our first inspection, but the inspectors were kind of very transparent, and they were like, we're not here to take away your license. We understand that you're small scale. Maybe this isn't something that we're used to. We're just really there to kind of learn more about your operation and how we can work with you to meet all the regulations. And they have they asked for a number of SOPs, definitely not all of them, but just the main ones. So like propagation, vegetation, harvest, distribution, I think were like the main ones. And then all the batch records for our lots. And there was a handful of small observations. The only major observation we had is that we had keef on our books, and apparently a cultivator is not allowed to have keef, even though, I mean, I don't have to get too deep into it, but I was really not happy with that whole regulation that only processors could have keef because it's considered an extract, and they basically made us destroy our keef. So the obvious workaround is just to mix in the keef with your shake, because you're going to end up with keef and shake. That's unavoidable. That's unavoidable from a cultivator's perspective. It's just a matter of mixing it in. But inspection, if you have good fences and your facility is clean and you have all your batch paperwork and your SOPs are up to date, then you have nothing to worry about.
And Jeff, do you guys have any experience with an inspection yet?
We've done a couple of the CRA compliance audits where
Right.
they're doing very similar things. They're asking for invoices, they're asking for destruction records, a couple SOPs. Similar to Jacob, I mean, another maybe misconception that's out there is, they're after your license, right? I mean, I really do believe that they're here to help. I mean, yes, they are the regulatory board, and yes, they are looking for certain things, but so far we've found our CRA people and anybody I've dealt with at Health Canada have been pretty helpful. We haven't gone through an inspection with Health Canada yet. It's probably coming pretty soon, I would expect. But yeah, I mean, similar to Jacob, what he was saying, like just having all your batch records in place. One thing I will say is we did a mock audit with Tamara. Highly recommend. She went through and gave us some feedback on here's some opportunities for improvement. I was able to bounce off a couple of ideas because of how we do our harvest and, some changes I wanted to make in our record process, and it was great. So, but yeah, no official inspection from Health Canada yet, but likely in the next couple of months, I would expect.
Yeah, so just to build off of that, we didn't do a mock audit with Tamara. So we kind of, I had asked Tamara to help us because we had 2 weeks before our Health Canada audit. And so for those 2 weeks, Tamara was looking over all our paperwork and everything, and was certainly instrumental in helping us getting prepared. And her point was just that every reviewer is different. And because our reviewers, like, it was their first micro, I guess they're generally nice guys. Maybe they're a little bit easier or nicer. So it does also depend on which reviewer you get. But regardless, you should definitely be prepared before you get that inevitable email of the Health Canada inspection.
I think last time we spoke, you also mentioned CRA wanted a video of you counting all of your seeds, right?
Yeah, so the CRA I have found has been a lot more tedious to work with than Health Canada, because I've been through 2 CRA inspections now. The first one I thought was closed out, but then the reviewer had left the department and a different CRA agent took over and is now looking to relook at everything. And I have about 10,000 seeds on my book. And the CRA agent, I can't make the stuff up, asked me to send a video of me counting, by hand, because I don't have an expensive machine, every single one of those 10,000 seeds. My response was just like, you got to send that to me in writing, because that's the funniest thing I've ever heard.
That's nuts. Like that's so crazy. I mean, it's so funny because we have 500,000 seeds on book. So if that happens, I'll see it there. I mean, there's no way.
There's no
I've certainly heard stories of when CRA does the in-person inspections that they'll come and physically count them themselves too. I don't know if they travel with a counting machine or what, but
it's just ludicrous. Like the CRA, it's just honestly a redundant organization. Like, why is the government expanding double the resources, Health Canada and the CRA, to essentially do the same job? And the CRA is like disorganized, and it's so Health Canada is one thing, because Health Canada will come and inspect you, pass, fail, they'll close it out. The CRA seems to be this like ongoing headache that I have found over the past 2 years.
So I'm going to jump into the chat now, and it looks like there's a couple questions that you've answered, but I've noticed several questions about using your hydrogen peroxide wash, and one of them is, has there been any feedback from other license holders, as well as any feedback from Health Canada on that approach?
From processors, no, there has not been any pushback. I think ultimately, like, you look at the lab results and you see, oh, it's past microbial, it has good THC, has good terpenes. What more could I ask for? Again, I think if your options are that over like irradiation or something, I'm not totally against irradiation. I think there's been a lot of good studies showing that it doesn't have too detrimental an effect. But just simply from a cost perspective, washing makes a lot of sense. But no, I would just be transparent with that to your processor, and I don't think they'll take any issue with that.
So there's another question I'm not sure I understand, from an anonymous attendee. Says, thanks, will a greenhouse pass as a building for this purpose if it can be cleaned, as you mentioned? I'm not sure if that rings a bell for either of you.
Was that in reference to the drawing room? Because there was an earlier question about that.
Oh, yeah, I think, okay, yeah. So the initial question was, do you need a building approved by Health Canada under the cannabis regulations to complete drying at an outdoor site, or can you hang dry outside? And what was your response there?
So if you go into the answered section, you can read that, but your Health Canada will require you to have that building, and you're also going to want that building. Ultimately, it's going to help your operations. I don't think like a greenhouse is not something that's climate controlled. You don't want any light on the buds, because that's going to degrade the THC. So even if you like cover it up and there's no light inside, then you're still going to, you might not even pass microbial. It depends if you're hanging outdoors. And I just don't think that would be approved by Health Canada as well. You need an indoor building to get the license.
To your point, I mean, I don't think you would want to do that, right? I mean, you having that climate controlled environment for drying is so crucial to the process. We have a hoop house on our nursery site, and we make use of that from the cultivation side. But we would never hang anything to dry, and that is just not practical. So that's we have a building separate for that.
So there's another question, and this might be maybe more of a long one to follow up with someone on, Jacob, but Bill Logan asks, how do you write up an SOP for bud washing with hydrogen peroxide to satisfy Health Canada?
Hey, Billy, thanks for being here. I can send you an SOP. So I think that's just a win. I don't know if you can hear that. It's a windy day. But it's I think I put it into my harvest SOP, and it's just an extra step. So not too different than what you'd probably expect.
And just for everyone, I think, Jeff, you put your email up in the chat. I'm not sure, Jacob, if you have a contact, if anyone wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
My email is, I can put it in the chat as well. Would be best. Should I just put it in the chat? Is that best?
Yeah, please. That'd be great. And then let's see, here's another comment from Jeremy Jones, who is a retailer up in Yukon. He says, we sell more craft cannabis than much of Canada, according to Headstat stats. Many of our top sellers did not even register in the top 50 of jurisdictions such as BC, Alberta, and Ontario. So I think it's interesting. I've certainly pointed out to a lot of micros to take a look at Yukon. It's a much smaller market, but I think that actually can offer a lot of opportunities for micros that have smaller batches.
I think this is also an interesting point around getting product to the shelf. Is, I mean, if you have a retailer that's interested, this is a great opportunity as a producer to go and connect with those retailers and kind of try to hit the provincial boards from both sides. Because if the retailers can identify demand, in this case, I mean, Jeremy's clearly identifying a demand and a great opportunity. We're not registered with Yukon at this point. We would love to be, but this is a great avenue in there, right? So I think having a conversation, and then again, if you're going to the provincial boards as the producer, it really strengthens your argument to say, hey, I'm connected with a couple of retailers, that work in your province. They're super interested in stocking our product. How do we make that happen?
Yeah, and I'll give that plug that all the micros I talk to, that's one of the pieces of advice I give right off the bat is make sure you're out there interacting with retailers as much as possible and building that buzz, because ideally that will bubble up to the provincial buyers. So it really can't hurt to build those bridges.
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize that this is still early on. I mean, in terms of how many micros there now are in this industry and the lack of infrastructure that's been built around those micros, I still think there's a lot of potential for processors to captivate on that. I'm working with a company called Ontario Microgrowers, which, I mean, they're totally, and you can look them up, but they're totally positioned around helping micros get into the OCS, which, is very much a ground up thing, but it's about connecting to the retailers and showing the OCS that there's a strong demand for micros. So there's still a lot to come. I think, Jeff and I have seen the worst of it, and I think it's just going to get better from here.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. Like, we're so early in this process. We've gotten to market a couple of different ways. These ways may close, they may open up more. There's going to be new ways to get to market. Companies are going to come and go. I think, it's such early days, and it's tough to see at this point. We were talking before the call. I mean, it'll just be very interesting to see what outdoor flower does this year, because there's more of it on the market. There's a few companies that have gotten outdoor flower to market, and will be just very interesting to see what the consumer reaction is, and what that looks like at the end of the season.
You're on mute, Dave.
Thanks, Jacob. Martin F has a question, wondering whether you take any special measures to store cured product to keep it as fresh as possible before you have a buyer processor locked in. So that's for both of you guys.
We use we actually put them in leaf bags for right after drying, and we find that kind of preserves the terps a bit and is going to slowly evaporate a little bit of any excess moisture. And that's just for a couple of days, and then we just put it in food grade poly bags that we can tie off. And then we'll just keep a moisture meter in there, and we'll just keep on burping that until the moisture is down below the RH is below 60% or something like that.
And Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, really, really similar. Curing in bags, and then just storage in food safe plastic bags. We've kind of experimented with what are they called, the Boveda packs, and another brand this year as well. So again, and this is part of the learning process, right? What's working best, what's not. So that's kind of how we've done it. I mean, with us, the timing of it, we pulled the plants down in September, and we were on the shelves at the end of November. So, that's, it was a very, very tight time frame. So storage for us wasn't as much of an issue kind of for longer term, so it was more just really high focus on the drying and curing side of things to make sure that it was ready to go.
Yeah, the Boveda packs and stuff, I mean, going back to what I said, how moisture is just key, that the Boveda packs will help preserve the moisture as well. So I'd recommend it for sure.
Jeff, I forgot to ask you earlier, Jacob mentioned he's primarily growing in pots. Are you guys growing in soil or in pots?
We did a little bit of both, mostly in soil. So we did some pretty heavy amendments to the soil in our area. I think we're going to continue growing in soil next year. We may continue to experiment with pots with some strains because we're a nursery, like a genetics company first and foremost. I mean, we got the micro to be able to do actually some genetic testing with the side benefit of, hey, we get to, sell some flower. We do a lot of experimentation in our micro. We do a lot of pheno hunting and just trying to collect as much data as possible. So we're going to continue to do both, probably a little bit more pots next year, I would expect. But the difference is with pots, you get a lot more control over what's in there, and you can really, really experiment with your soil. We've done some soil tests recently just on our, on our ground soil, which is great because now we kind of know how to amend it for next year. But the advantage with soil as well is, I mean, your plants can get huge. I mean, especially we're going to, again, do a bit of growing from seed and from clone next year. And, the seeds, if you're planting seeds in March, and you're letting those things grow, I mean, you're going to get some massive plants and massive yield if you're growing in soil. So there's the advantage of that. But again, it's just what works best for your facility, right?
There's a question in the chat, I think, that goes back to packaging. Someone just asked, no nitrogen.
We looked into that. It wasn't the right decision for us.
And Jacob?
I think, like, from a curing perspective, I've never heard of that. I think nitrogen goes more into the processor's decision in terms of how they're packaging it.
You're saying that's more of a consumer packaging thing.
Right. So not something a cultivator would generally deal with. Yeah. So
there's another question, Jacob, about your hydrogen peroxide washing. Derek asks, is there a consumer awareness of Willow using this product, and any feedback on that? Could it be a beneficial product offering differentiator?
Sorry, you just cut out. I can't find that question in the.
It says, is there a consumer awareness of Willow Weed using this procedure? Is there any feedback? Could this be a beneficial product offering or differentiator?
Hey, I'll definitely maybe post a tweet about it. Because I do think that being a company that's against irradiation certainly is unique in this market. So it's not a bad idea. I can maybe promote it on social media. And then going back to Billy's question, I think there is a type of, because hydrogen peroxide is not allowed as a pesticide. So I don't think you're allowed to, like, I think you just have to clarify that you're not using it as a pesticide. You're using it for mold or something. Because if you don't comment that, Health Canada might assume that it's for pesticide, that it's for pests, and then you might get an observation. So that's the only other factor, is that to specify exactly why you're using the hydrogen peroxide.
So it looks like we have a lot of retailers in the chat. So while we have a couple minutes, I'll have a couple more questions for Jacob and Jeff, but I was wondering if retailers want to provide any comments on their experience with consumer interest in micro products and outdoor products and craft products, and how much of maybe education goes into that on your end. So maybe while people have a chance to comment on that, we could just hop back over. Jacob and Jeff, you had talked a bit about this relationship with processors. Jeff, you were able to develop a relationship where you had your brand on your product. Jacob, is that something that my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is so far your product is sold under another company brand. Are you looking to change that maybe for next season, or is that something you're happy with?
Well, so last year we did have Willow Weed on the label.
Okay.
And that, was a huge plus for us having a brand. With the whole system of a processor, like having a PO with the province under a certain genetic, that's not, unfortunately, I don't think a cultivator would be able to get their brand on the label. So that's kind of the trade-off. But ultimately, I'll still let my followers know how it's being sold. And it really is a business to business kind of where the way the cultivator is in the industry, that, I mean, Jeff has sort of like really pushed the boundaries of what a cultivator can do. And I think that's just amazing. I really hope to see more of that, of taking your product all the way to market. And in that, if that becomes more mainstream, then absolutely having the brand, having your logo, your company on the logo is going to be super beneficial, because again, the closer you are to the consumer, the more your bottom line can be.
And are you able to interact with retail stores in Ontario, and have you gotten any feedback from them on products? First, Jacob.
So our stuff is in BC.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And it was just released in BC. So I'll let you know.
Okay.
Hopefully there's good feedback. Going back to last year, the retailers in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, there was definitely positive feedback, and selling medically as well, because I sold over shelter, and we got a lot of positive reviews from those medical customers. And having that direct feedback is so important to the cultivator to know, what can you do better? What are you doing well? And because the cultivators are generally so far away from the retailers and the consumers, it can be really difficult to get that crucial feedback.
And so just to clarify, it was your first year you had products in Saskatchewan and Manitoba. This year you've just released products through your partner into BC.
Exactly.
Okay. And Jeff, have you had much feedback? I know you just got products into Ontario. You'll have pre-rolls, sounds like early next year in BC. Any feedback yet?
This is I don't know, I guess the gift and the curse of having your brand solely on the label, right, is the feedback comes to us. So we have a contact us, page through our website. So, I mean, so far so good. We've only been in OCS for a couple of weeks. So more than anything, we've gotten feedback from retailers. So, we'll get the occasional like Instagram shout outs and a couple of people going to our website and our contact us. And it's more just questions like, hey, what's this all about? Like, this is new. We don't see a lot of micro products. Can you give us the lineage, right? So all that stuff. And I mean, we love answering those questions. Direct consumer feedback, I think it's still early. I kind of put in the chat, like, anyone's in Ontario, we love feedback. Like, we really want feedback on the product and what you guys think of it. We have had our seeds, the apricot kush seeds, in OCS for probably since May. So we missed kind of like the really heavy outdoor kind of seed window, but still did fairly well. And we do get a lot of feedback on those as well. And a lot of consumers will come to us around like, how to grow questions. So again, I think the advantage of having the brand on the label is just consumer knows where to go and kind of how to get that direct feedback. So we do feel like there's a bit of a direct contact. And then of course, in order to really start to make sure that our SKU for the Sweet Texado Lavender sells through, I mean, we are contacting retailers. Like, we're reaching out, we're doing the sales effort, which again, that's our responsibility as per kind of our agreement with, our processor and our partners.
So big comment here from Jeremy Jones at Triple J's in Yukon. And one of the things he mentions is, and I hear this from a lot of retailers, and I know this is a challenge in terms of packaging and cost, but walk-ins are very common for us. So pre-rolls and 1 grams are top sellers. And he would love to see some sample packs with a variety of 1 gram options or pre-rolls so that people can try different cultivars. I'm sure you guys are aware of that as well, but I just wanted to throw that up there. And then it looks like we have time for one last question, if you guys are comfortable sharing. Benjamin asks about yield as well as price per pound, or I would imagine probably per gram is a more realistic measure.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, yield is going to depend on the strain you're growing, and really the method you're growing. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, if we grow from seed and we grow all the way out, from March, we're going to get a much bigger yield. We started late May with clones. And so, we know that we probably could next year get a better yield. So Yeah, I mean, it's such a variety. Like I kind of go with the standard of around half pound per plant. It's a bit of a legacy metric. And then as far as price per gram, I think I mentioned it on an answer to the question, but it depends on which way you go, because however many services the processor, your partners are providing for you, the less dollars per gram you're going to get. And so a lot of these companies will come to you and say, hey, we're going to do everything. Like, we'll brand it, we'll package it, we'll sell it. Great. I don't have to do anything. It's almost kind of like a bulk sale, but then I'm only going to get maybe a buck 50 per gram. Whereas if you're going to go and kind of really minimize what the processor is doing for you, essentially all, in our case, what they're doing is they're packaging, and then they're providing a sales amendment and excise stamping and all of that. I mean, you could get $3 to $4 a gram. So it's a huge variety depending on what you choose to do with it. But I'm happy to elaborate further if anybody wants to connect directly.
And Jacob, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I would say that, like, from a feasibility perspective, that the outdoor micro is tough. There's no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It's farming, and every farmer has the same complaint. Not enough yield and not enough money. And it's not that different in the cannabis scene. What Jeff has done in terms of having so much control over the entire process, he's been able to extract a lot more profit. And it's almost really the only economical way as an outdoor micro to have some sort of success. This year we had about 30 kilos of yield. And I think, you can maybe expect not a lot more than that from an outdoor micro. And that's certainly not enough, I think, in the long run, from the perspective of provinces having LOQs, and also just in terms of sustaining your business. And I had a long call with Health Canada a month ago explaining how outdoor micros, need to have a larger canopy. Like, indoor micros can get 4 or 5 crops a year, and we pay the same licensing fees and regular fees. So an outdoor micro should have 4 to 5 times as much space. And that was kind of my logical argument. But as it stands right now, 200 square meters is not a lot. And anyone making a business plan, you should be able to survive at $1 a gram. You might be able to get $3 a gram. You might be able to get $2 a gram. But if you go in with the expectation of anything more than $1 a gram, and you can't survive if you don't get $2 a gram or $3 a gram, then you're not going to be able to kind of ride the waves of the volatility of this very new industry. So
I think that's such a great point, right? Is like really having a clear business plan and understanding, where your break even is, where what you have to get, and understanding kind of what your walk away price is. And Jacob, I mean, it's also a good point just around kind of the size of the outdoor micro. And I think something that Jacob's been doing really well is like advocating for the micro cultivation industry. And I mean, you think about the opportunity if our 200 square meters was even 400, 600, right? What that would do. It's not that much of a change, but I think for the outdoor growers specifically, that could be something. I think if we get the advocacy around it, that maybe that is a positive change that happens. And then all of a sudden, it becomes a pretty significant business.
Exactly.
Something to think about.
Okay, well, we've gone a little bit over time, and so I should probably wrap it up, but I really appreciate both of you taking an hour out of your busy days to chat with us, as well as everyone who attended and asked questions. We will be posting this on the StratCann YouTube channel in the next few days, and we'll post a link up on our social media channels, and I'll also share it with Jacob and Jeff. If anyone has any questions and wants to reach out to me, I'm david@stratcann.com. That's STRATCANN. It looks like Jeff put his email up in the chat. He's jeff@weatheredislands.com. And Jacob, what was your contact again?
Jacob Saffer-Spiro @gmail.com. You can go to willowweed.ca. and you'll have all my contact information there as well.
Any last little shout outs for either of you?
Thanks for everyone. Thanks for attending. Thank you, StratCann and Dave. It was a pleasure to be able to do this.
Yeah. Thanks, David. Thanks, Jacob. Good talking to you both. And yeah, love this micro community. It's been awesome. It's been supportive, and really wouldn't be here without that community. So thank you.
Well, I can't wait to buy Willow Weed and Weathered Islands here in BC in the next couple days or weeks, or as soon as it's all available.
Awesome.
Okay.
All right. Thanks everybody. And check out
everyone.
the social media channels. We'll have this up on YouTube very soon.